What's up, guys? This is Remy Colton. Have you guys have seen in my previous blogs. This is Miss Garcia. She is a Spanish teacher at Caleb Middle School. So I have some questions. Her and I sat down for a few minutes and kind of went over this, but I'm going to ask her some questions and kind of go from there. So first, have you spoken two major languages your entire life?
So I actually learned Spanish first. I was born in Venezuela. So I didn't know English until I was about 10 years old when I moved to the States.
Okay, so 10 years. And then where did you go to school?
I went to Texas A&M University, and then I got my alternative certification for teacher through Texas Teachers the following year.
Following year, okay. And then let's see, how many languages do you currently speak?
So I speak two languages, English and Spanish. Like I said, Spanish was my first language, and then after I learned English when I was about 10, 11, 12, I've been fluent in both since then.
Okay, whenever you were in school here in the States, when you moved here in 10, were you in like English language learning classes?
I was in ESL.
Okay.
It was a contained class with all Spanish speakers, and then gradually moved towards just inclusion in regular classes.
Were the teachers like supportive of all that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was in Florida, so there's a large population of Hispanics, so we were able to do that. But later on, I actually moved to Louisiana, and they had no program at all, so I was kind of just thrown in there. But luckily, I was okay.
I lived in New Orleans for a long period of time. Both of my parents are both Spanish speakers. They lived in Spain for 7 years.
Oh, nice.
And that's something my mom always tells me. She's like, living in New Orleans, yeah, you just never saw it.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to kind of how you're teaching now and your students. How do you get your students motivated in the class, especially in middle school, to want to learn a second language?
Right, in middle school. So part of that motivation actually has nothing to do with Spanish. It comes from the fact that here in Texas and in our district, it's a required, you need to have 2 years of foreign language to graduate high school. And so it's great that in middle school you can actually start getting that credit. So they always like the kind of the challenge that brings. I guess the second way I keep them motivated is at the very beginning of class we always talk about why Spanish is relevant in their lives and what the advantages of being bilingual can bring to them. So that's always kind of like the hook that I bring to them, and especially living in Texas, they know that they're bound to be around other people. As a matter of fact, a lot of my students come from Hispanic families, but they just were never taught Spanish. So for them, it's even something that hits closer to home for them to learn the language.
I'm sure you have a lot of kids that know Spanish too, that kind of get that credit, which is nice.
Right.
Something that we see a lot, like in our textbooks for the course, like talk about having to have like a special talent to learn a language, or whether or not you do. So I'm curious if you believe like all your students have that equal opportunity, or does it kind of take that special skill to like really grasp another language at this age?
I don't think that it takes a special skill. All of us are born with the capability of learning a language. Since we're babies, how do we learn language? We learn it from the exposure. Your parents don't sit there and tell you the grammatical rules of English or any of those things. It's just something that you acquire. So all of us have the ability to do it. The only special things that comes from it is how teachers give them that exposure. It's definitely not about the student. Oh, they're stuck. They're not able to learn it. It's not about that. It's how the teachers find the different ways to teach that. It's just like with any other subject. You can't expect all students to learn it just one way. You kind of have to have that flexibility in your instruction of how you're going to reach each of the students. So I definitely
like differentiated
instruction. Yeah.
What do you think your students like struggle with the most?
So I think one of the things that they struggle with most, especially in middle school, is that first language interference. So like for example, today we were doing a writing. A lot of them don't even know, oh, I have to start my sentence with a capital letter, or I need a comma here, or this is a run-on sentence. So that first language interference is actually one of their biggest problems, which is why they encourage us to not do, okay, translate this from this to this. We really have to just, this is what it is, expose them to the second language rather than going back and forth. Yeah, sometimes it's important for them to understand why it is, because there's concepts, grammatical concepts especially, that don't exist in English where they do in Spanish, or things may be flipped around in the way that they say things. So a lot of times it's that first language interference that gets to them.
Gets them?
Mhm.
What about, and then like the other side of that, what do you think is the easiest for them?
The easiest, so
I mean, that could be like numbers, you know, are they
right.
like something like that?
Well, I think the easiest thing for them is there's so many words in English that are cognates.
Yeah.
Okay. So for them, seeing that and kind of saying like, oh, like I can actually understand what this is, like words that they've never seen before in their lives, that they're able to understand, it's easier for them to make that connection. And then I think it's easy whenever you're doing something that they can identify with, that they enjoy talking about. So because I teach level 1, a lot of the things that we talk about is all about themselves. Oh, this is what I'm like, this is what my family's like, this is what I like. So having that is also makes it easier for them to be interested in what they're learning, and of course then learning it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, do you have students that like are good at speaking Spanish but then not good at writing it, or vice versa?
Mhm.
Like,
I actually think that for them it's much easier to speak it. Since the very beginning, it's important for me for them to feel comfortable saying things and not thinking that they're going to sound dumb or that they're going to say it wrong. So I think empowering them in that sense makes them better, and it makes them excel in the speaking. Like I said, with the writing, a lot of that first language interference kind of gets them. And then of course spelling and things that don't exist in English, like accent marks or the different letters that we don't have, kind of makes them struggle with the writing.
it's like, it's not something obviously I think about, but like hearing you say it, it correlates so much to just, obviously just speaking English too.
Mhm.
Obviously speaking it's easy, or easier.
Or right,
but
than the
that's
writing.
That's why they take this language arts class, yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Let's see, do you think that the students or a person's level of intelligence affects their ability to learn a language?
Not at all. I think it has absolutely just to do with being exposed to it.
Yeah.
Granted, like I said, some of them you're going to have to use differentiated instruction to reach,
Sure.
but it's all about the exposure that they have to it, and the practice that they put into it.
All right, last question I have for you is, how important do you think like social support is,
Mhm.
or like, I guess like practice at home?
Well, I personally have a theory. I don't like to send assignments that are written or as homework, because they don't have that support at home. Some of their parents don't speak Spanish. It would be a little unfair for them to just not be in the classroom getting the support from myself or from their peers. So I think what makes them excel or succeed is really taking them from, okay, I can understand this, or I can recall what we're talking about, and for them, like I said, to be able to really identify with it and take it outside of it. So luckily, like I said, we're in Texas, so a lot of their friends speak Spanish. Like I said, a lot of their families even speak Spanish. So hearing that outside of it really makes a difference. Like, for example, I remember one time I had a student who came and told me, "Miss, you'll never believe I went to a garage sale and I could understand what they were talking about in the prices because I knew my numbers." And I mean, even though she knew little pieces, she could gather what they were talking about.
Together.
And that's always what, as a language teacher, you want them to do. It's not the performance. I'm sure that they can fill in a test and do it correctly. They've been in the class, they're kind of in the zone whenever they're doing that, but it's what happens outside of it when it's unexpected, is that oh wow, I really reached that kid in this particular
They're
topic.
using it and applying it.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
that's pretty neat. Well, thank you so much for
You're
sitting down with me,
No
Ms.
problem.
Garcia. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.